Hi everyone, welcome back to Invested, where we talk about wealth as being more than just money. Our partners Paul Rand, Joel Rand, and Sarah Minikari will bring in guests and industry thought leaders to chat about meaningful topics on personal finances, health and wellness, ideas for your business, tax planning, and other key issues that impact our lives and our livelihood. So thank you for joining us, and we hope you find our discussions not only practical and educational, but maybe sometimes a little thought-provoking. With that, let's get to the episode.
On today's episode of Invested, our special guest is Mike Gola, Director of Strategic Accounts at BizEquity. During our conversation, we'll discuss the importance of knowing the value of your business and how that impacts so many facets of a business owner's life, some of which may surprise you. BizEquity is the world's largest provider of business valuations, having valued over 33 million private businesses globally. And the firm is a strategic partner of ours and has helped us provide valuable insight for our clients in developing long-term planning around their businesses. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Mike Gola of BizEquity.
So here we are with Mike Gola, who is Director of Strategic Accounts at BizEquity. BizEquity is a firm that we have partnered with to help some of our business owners help with valuations and determining what their business is worth and where they are now and where they're going, and some of the steps that we can help business owners with if they're looking at exit strategies or they're looking at protection strategies for either their business and their family. So I just wanted to say hi, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Glad to be here.
You bet. Why don't you give us just a quick overview of BizEquity, how you guys work, and some of the things that go on?
Yeah, totally. So we've been around now for about 10 years. And essentially 10 years ago, we set out, and it continues to be our mission today, to help business owners know and understand the values of their businesses. And essentially what we've done is we've created a platform, a tool that we put in the hands of folks like yourself, where you can provide real-time valuations to business owners, and they don't have to go through a $15,000 2-month process. They can do it pretty much at essentially a snap of a finger, and then from there, once they know the value, they work with good folks like yourself, and from there they can plan around that valuation. We've long said, how can you plan effectively if you don't know the value of many times the largest asset? And so that has been our mission from the start, and continues to be today, is just helping get that knowledge out there.
Yeah, I think that's, it's fantastic, because a lot of times when we're doing planning for clients, and especially small business owners, where this is a heavy concentration of their net worth, right? Yeah. And if we're doing planning for them and you don't know what the heaviest concentration of your net worth is, if you don't know what that value is, that makes it challenging to find out, hey, where are we now? Where do I want to go? And then how do we get there? So that's right. That's great.
Exactly. Yep.
We work with a lot of CPAs as well, and they also do business valuations. Mm-hmm. And many times that we talk to them about this process, we explain to them, hey, this is not necessarily a replacement for doing a full-blown business valuation. Can you talk a little bit about how this works in the whole strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the traditional business valuation, what the industry calls a certified report. Yeah. With those, there's times when those are going to be absolutely necessary. Usually when the IRS would need a certified appraisal. We actually have a team of folks inside, our Chief Valuation Officer, Scott Gabehart, who we call him the guru. He's the gentleman responsible pretty much for our entire platform. He does those as well. And there are times when they're necessary. Where our reports are going to come in, they're going to give folks an understanding of their value. Not getting too deep in terms of the analysis of the business, like a certified report. Where generally certified reports are still 50 to 150 pages. Ours is still a comprehensive 29-page report, but ours is not meant to be a replacement for that by any means. So to your point, we hear it a lot where there's certified valuation analysts or CPAs that do the full certified appraisals, but they also are users of BizEquity as well, because it'll give them kind of a snap of a finger, give them that valuation relatively quickly and inexpensively, and still give them a pretty darn good accurate valuation of their business.
Yeah, and I think that's great because when we're talking to business owners and they've looked at maybe doing a business valuation in the past and had somebody say, yeah, for $15,000, $20,000, we can tell you, we can go through this and a heavy review of all of your books and going through that. And this is not that. It's not much easier, much less painful, and a quicker turnaround time.
It is. Yeah. And the statistic we talk about probably ad nauseum, but it is 98% of business owners in the US don't know their value.
Right.
And that's why. It's because the traditional process is really expensive and it is time consuming and it's done offline. So it can be somewhat intrusive. And ours is more, the way I like to think about it is using BizEquity is more of a proactive valuation approach, meaning people can get their value now and plan around that value. When you need a certified valuation, that's generally something that's reactive and event is triggering the need for that. And that's why people aren't going to pay a lot of money to get a certified valuation done if they don't necessarily need it. And that's where we kind of pair pretty nicely with it.
Right. So, and if I'm a small business owner and I'm thinking about this and I'm now starting to realize, and we'll go through some of the rationales for wanting to go through this process, but now I've decided, okay, this is a good idea for me. How intrusive is this? What's how much information do I need to get? How long does this take? How do I get the information?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a few different ways to gather and get the information necessary for the valuation. There's 29 total inputs. So it's not that much. It's surprisingly pretty simple. Now, what's going on behind the scenes is naturally a more complicated set of math going on. But really, what we need is generally a tax form. We can get it done that way. The system itself, as you probably know, will let you know where on the tax form you'll find all of the financial input. So it's income section, asset section, liabilities. And that can be filled out really three ways. One, as I mentioned, with the tax form, you can, of course, use any financial statements to gather the info. But the platform itself also has what we call a delegate button. So you can essentially delegate or send a smart link out to a third party. That can be anyone. And then they can fill out the info. So you had talked about it earlier, CPAs. A lot of times, advisors who are BizEquity users will loop in the CPA to get involved in the process. And what it tends to do is create these nice natural ecosystems where everyone's working to the benefit of the business owner. You send out that link, the CPA fills it out, and then whoever, you being the user, you generate your report. So it's really, maybe I'm biased, but it's really not too intrusive at all. It's really just a matter of saying, hey, can I get your income statement of the last year to 3 years? We can go up to 4, but it's usually year to 3 years, or a tax return. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. The more information, the better, but it doesn't have to go crazy back. I don't need 10 years worth of returns and
right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we've done business valuations, and some people say, hey, my bookkeeper has all that stuff, and we've done the connection with the bookkeeper. Some of it's been my accountant, some of it's been the actual business owner, and then with some larger companies, it's been the CFO. But it could be anybody that has access to the numbers and could provide that.
Right, exactly. Yep, and that's usually the business owner usually lets you know, hey, send it to this person. Could be someone in the organization, with CPA, someone else, but it makes the process a little easier.
Yeah. So in going through that, and when I look at this, there are, hey, here are all the things I can use to scare you into getting a business evaluation. Here are all the benefits of having that. Just talking about some of the scary situations, and tell us about some of the things that you've seen. Like, what are some of the risks of not having a good idea of the value of your business? Yeah,
probably the number one, quote unquote horror story that I've seen in my 4 years here at BizEquity are those situations where something unfortunate, unforeseen happens to the business owner, and they didn't have a buy, sell, or key man plan in place, and that actually within the platform itself, as you know, we have an insurance report that we produce.
Yep.
The reason our team developed the insurance report was actually a close friend of our founder that actually happened to one of their clients. And we thought, it would be really helpful because it tends to be the next natural conversation, right? And after you deliver a valuation is to say, let's just make sure you have you have proper insurance in place. And so that's where that report comes in. And that is, you hate to try to scare people, but that is the one where, and those are not fun stories when that happens. So we have that insurance report. I'd say that's the number one. If people are asking what's a reason to get a valuation aside from just valuing.
So,
right?
And just to back up for a second, for those that may not know about a buy-sell agreement or a key person. So in a buy-sell agreement, we'll take them kind of one at a time.
Yeah.
In a buy-sell agreement, maybe we have multiple owners of an entity, right? And each of those owners, they may or may not have the same percentage interest. But the question becomes, if there is an exit of a single partner or a single owner, what is the agreement that's in place to determine what is the value of that partner's ownership at the time of exit, right? So one part of that is, hey, we all got to agree that if somebody decides to leave or if something unfortunate happens to a single partner, how do we value what their share is, right? So part of it is the mechanism of how do we come to the value, which obviously this plays right into that. And then the question becomes, all right, well, how do we deal with that? I mean, certainly if somebody decides to leave voluntarily, you want to have an agreement in place to say, here's how it's going to work once we come to the valuation. But if somebody leaves unexpectedly and something happens, then you want to have possibly some insurance in place. So imagine a scenario where, hey, like our business, where we have 3 partners, something happens to me, and as much as my partners adore my wife, they may not want to be in business with her. So we have to have an agreement where my estate gets some value for my ownership in the business, right? Anything else on the sort of buy sell that you want to touch on?
No, I think that's pretty good. I just think that's the one, man, that the story that I hear, unfortunately, probably too often, where they're not fun. They're not fun because it's usually something unforeseen and unfortunate that happens, and then people are left with nothing in place to protect, and it's not good. It's not. And
then key person, likewise. Hey, I either the owner or maybe another key person in the organization, something happens to them. And the insurance part of that can provide liquidity so that you can go out and hopefully hire somebody to replace that person, because it's not easy. And certainly having a lump sum of cash can help with that process, and either whether it's a signing bonus or whatever the case might be. Right.
Exactly.
Okay, great. And going back to the buy-sell agreement, there are multiple ways. So say we're in a relationship with, there are multiple partners, or, 2 or 3 partners in an entity. We've agreed that, hey, if we've hammered out the process of, if one of us decides to leave, this is how it's done. But there are multiple ways of valuing a business, right? So can you talk about a few of the different ways that they might go about just getting a value for the business?
Yeah, you're referring to within our report, the 4 different conclusions.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So like you said, in valuation, there's many different ways to value a business, and ultimately, what we mean by a conclusion of value is a term we use a lot, and that's essentially the types of valuations you can do, and ultimately means how someone would ultimately sell the business, right? So within our report, we give 4 different conclusions of value. So we have the asset sale value, the equity value, the enterprise value, and then the liquidation value. Each one of those is going to be relevant, again, based on how the business is going to be sold ultimately. 9 times out of 10, it's the asset sale and the equity sale, which are going to be relevant to most business owners in the U.S. Enterprise value, that's going to be for larger companies, usually over 150 employees is kind of that the benchmark there. And then liquidation value, that's what we call a fire sale valuation calculation, right? That's there. We get the question a lot, why do we put that in our reports? Because sometimes it can be a negative number. And it's there more as a kind of a precautionary type of valuation calculation, meaning you can say to someone, look, if your liquidation value is very low or perhaps in the negative, maybe let's take some steps here to get that above water, so that if something unfortunate does happen, you're not stuck here with no value or a negative value, right? And then back to the asset sale and equity sale again. Those are 9 times out of 10. Those are what are going to be most relevant and how businesses are sold. And an equity sale, you think of that as like a stock sale, right? And then an asset sale would be all of the assets within the company itself, simply put. And so those reports that you deliver, they have all 4 of those in each and every one of those reports.
So what are, just for clarification, what are some of the scenarios where it may be a negative value in that liquidation?
For example, the one we see most often is outstanding loans. So if there's outstanding loans or there's some pretty substantial debt, that's where you're going to see those negative values in the liquidation side. And again, that's just one of those things where maybe, hey, let's try to work at getting, not that people aren't trying to get rid of their debt, but maybe take some extra steps there, just because it could be kind of alarming where you're looking at it and it's negative $400,000. So while we don't want to scare anyone, it certainly helps maybe get some steps in motion there to get them in a better situation. Well,
and that's certainly one of the main objectives of going through this process, right? Is because we want to sell when we want to sell, not when we have to.
Exactly.
And what are the scenarios where we can look at and say, well, if this, or this happens, then we would have to sell. And that's not a scenario where we would be, where we'd want to be. So, and that kind of bleeds into the whole estate planning strategy, right? So have this is one of the things we work with our clients in going through and saying, okay, have we done the what if scenario where something unfortunate happens and the primary owner of the business, now we have a business. Now what do? There's debt. Do we plan for that debt? And then if there's nobody from the family or nobody else inside the business to step into those big shoes, we're going to have to liquidate. And what's that process look like? So you talk about some of the things that, have you seen, or some of the things that might help in that planning process?
In terms of, so with that, I mean, it goes back to what we talked about at the top of our conversation here in terms of understanding the value, to kind of to backtrack there, the question we get, well, why would I need to know the value of my business if I'm not looking to sell? And that's the number one reason is well, maybe number 2. Number 1 would be growing the value of the business. But number 2 is being prepared for unforeseen events. I mean, look at what's happened the last year and a half to small businesses with COVID going on.
Absolutely.
A lot of folks were not in a proper position for something like that. Now that's an extreme case, but again, it helps to know just knowing the value of your largest asset. Imagine not knowing. Like I'm so ingrained in valuation now, being here 4 years, and like it's crazy to think about a situation where you wouldn't know, but so many folks don't know. And again, it comes down to those unforeseen events that could knowing the value can help those situations much better.
Yeah. And I think, the other thing that we emphasize with our business owners is, and you mentioned, well, what if I don't want to sell right now?
Right.
Which is fine. But there are all these other reasons to do a business valuation, at least have an idea of where you are and where you want to go, whether that's protection planning for the family, whether that's key person or buy sell, whether it's making sure the business has errors and omissions, enough coverage, right? Going through that part of the coverage analysis. But I think the other thing, and obviously we're very planning driven in this, planning. But even if you don't want to sell today, you want to look at, well, if I'm here today and I know I want to sell at some point in the future, or if there's going to be some sort of liquidity event, right? What do I need to do to get myself in the best position possible between now and that point in time? So whether that's 2 years out, 3 years out, 10 years out, you still want to look at where we are today, have somebody give you some feedback on, well, if you really want to maximize the sale value of this, these are the things that we would address first, second, and third. And can you talk about, the report points out a couple of things, right? Of, hey, this is how you compare versus other companies in your industry. Can you talk a little bit about some of the points on that?
Yeah, so we, within the report itself, aside from just delivering the value, I mentioned it's a 29-page report. So what we also do for, again, those folks that aren't looking to sell today, right? They're looking to grow the business. They're looking to plan. They're looking to protect. We have these 12, what we call key performance indicators. So essentially what it does is it lets the business know within their industry how they fare against their industry peers. And it gives them a gauge of, are they at, above, or below the industry averages? And it's things like return on equity, inventory turnover, debt to equity ratio. So little levers that they can pull where they could say, you know, you get this report, here's 8 areas where you're doing quite well. You're above the industry average. And then here's 4 where you're not doing so well. And then you can dial into those 4 particular areas and look at those as levers that you could pull to accelerate some growth and dive a little deeper, see where maybe there are some inefficiencies. Now, that I'd say usually on average, about 10 of those 12 key performance indicators are relevant in real life valuation cases. So usually we see on average about 6 of those are above the industry average, and about 3 or 4 are below. So it gives a really good opportunity to take a look under the hood, so to speak, in a few of those areas. And sometimes it can be pretty eye-opening. Businesses didn't even think of certain aspects of their business that are performing inefficiently. So it can be a nice way to start that conversation.
Yeah, you know, and one of the things that we find with business owners that do have an intent to sell someday, right? And most of them really don't know. They're not drilled down to it's going to be in this year. It's going to be right. And sometimes they base it on when I'm ready. Sometimes they base it on, hey, well, if I know I could sell it for this, then that gives me enough to feed and, you know, to meet all of my other goals that I want to meet in life. And, you know, that's kind of where we spend a lot of time talking to them about values and objectives and where do you want to be in life and what are your priorities apart from building this big thing that you've been working on your whole life, right? Or a good part of your life. Mm-hmm. And then so the valuation says, all right, realistically, and this is another point I wanted to make sure we talked about too, because people have an emotional attachment to their businesses, and just like they do their homes, right? Right. And so I know what I think my home is worth, but I have to go out and actually have somebody come appraise it and tell me. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I know clients or even myself, we get our homes appraised and we look at that and go, no, my house is way more than that. What do you know how much work I put into this? And same thing true to the business, right? Because we get very emotionally attached and we think we have an idea of what it's worth, but it really takes a professional coming in, giving you some statistical feedback and put some benchmarks to it to say, hey, this is where you really are. But that gives us a starting point. And then we can talk about, hey, if I got to here, if I could sell it for X, and then we can relate that back to, hey, well, you told me if you could sell it for X and you wanted to go write your book or teach the class or do whatever it is. Once we reach here, then we can do it. All right.
Absolutely. Yep. Right on.
All right.
Yeah.
What else can we cover that we didn't touch on? Oh, you know, one of the things we talked about, didn't talk about is different entities, whether it's S corps or LLCs. Can you talk about what role that plays in the valuation?
Well, so those the entities, our platform is designed. The type of entity doesn't necessarily impact the value directly.
Right.
What it does do, however, is based on the type of entity the business is we let you know what tax form you want to get to essentially help fill out the financial input. So, for example, if it's an S corp, the platform will say, all right, this is an S corp. Form 1120S is the associated tax form with it. So it's a nice way of making, again, that process not too intrusive, pretty easy, pretty quick, right? But the types of entities don't necessarily impact the values directly.
Okay. And then, you know, once we go through this process and so say we go through it, I get an idea of what my business is worth, and now I can have, I can go back and address my other outstanding issues that we've been, added to our punch list for the clients, whether that's the key person or whether that's the buy sell.
Yep.
Businesses change in value.
Yeah.
And, right. Sales go up, sales go down, inventory amounts change, all of those things happen. What's it like an ideal time frame for how often should I go through this process? How often should it be done?
Yeah, so that everyone's different in regards to how often they're getting valuations done. One of, in my opinion, the most powerful piece of our platform is that we will update the values of every company in our platform automatically. So even if you didn't change an input, right? So let's say we put in 2020, 2019, 2018's info. Let's say the value is 4.2 million today. A year from now, you can jump in and it'll have a new value based on how different factors in the industry have impacted the value, and it'll show how it fluctuated over that last year. So there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer in terms of how frequently. What I've seen as a best practice is usually every year, right? Folks will generate a new report and give it to the business owner, and a lot of times pair it with maybe an annual review to say, hey, here's where your business was a year ago, here's where it is today, and then here's what happened over those last 12 months. So it enables that, as we're talking about planning and protecting, it enables that ongoing discussion and no pun intended, ongoing value add around valuation, right? Where this is constantly being tracked and you don't even have to change anything. I mean, we do recommend putting in every year, putting in the new financials, but you can see values sometimes change from, a few days to like every 3 days or so. Usually the swings are over a couple of weeks, but it's pretty cool to see when you look back at how the values have fluctuated.
Yeah. And, one of the other things I was thinking about that a lot of people may or may not know, and they're thinking about, okay, well, gosh, I have a dental practice, or I have a construction company, or I'm an insurance agent. Will all of this stuff apply to me? So, how do you handle different kinds of businesses?
Yeah, so we have, there's about 900 different industries that we're able to run valuations on, and every one of them, the industry. When you start a valuation, the most important piece of the puzzle is making sure you have the right industry code up front, because we're getting fed so much industry specific data. Not to get too technical, but it's so industry specific and industry driven in terms of how we're calculating the values. That's the most important piece of the puzzle. Now, when it comes down to actual conversation, whether it's manufacturing versus a dental practice, we actually have a number of different white papers that our valuation team has rolled out to help. For example, one of them is on a dental practice, and how those valuations differ from maybe a physician's office versus a different type of medical practice. So we have tons of different content there. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were asking in terms of the different industries, but again, it is the valuation themselves are so industry specific that's a huge piece of the puzzle there.
No, yeah, I think the main point I wanted to make is that with this tool, we have the capacity to be able to do pretty much any industry. It's not like, hey, this is only for doctors, or this is only for a certain profession, or, it covers services, it covers manufacturing, it covers real estate, all of those kinds of things.
In 4 years, I haven't had one time where we weren't able to run a valuation based on the industry. Really, the only time it wouldn't work is if it's a really, really new, not even an industry specific, but more a very, very new company that didn't have much revenue. It was really the only time it would work. I mean, I think this point, 2 months ago, I think it was 937 industries we have in the platform, and we usually add a couple more each year as new ones emerge. But that's another nice aspect of the tool is that it goes across pretty much all of those industries.
And then I know we talked about this before a little bit, and forgive me, but I know you have some statistics and some information on the accuracy of the valuations when compared to other. Yeah. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. So we talked earlier about the certified appraisal versus what our online valuation does, right? From a pure calculation and methodology standpoint, we're arriving at the results the same exact way. So a little background there. Quick story is that our Chief Valuation Officer, Scott Gabehart, as I mentioned, he does the certified appraisals. He's been doing them for 20, 25 years. He regularly works with the IRS on valuation type cases. And he essentially took his methodology that he's done for 25 years, and that's what runs our platform. And so every time we've had to get approval, Hightower being one of them, we have to go through the old compliance gauntlet, right? And every time we do that, we're usually compared. They'll take X number of our valuations and compare them to offline valuations or what an investment bank might have valued, and we're usually falling within 3 to 5%, give or take, compared to the offline valuation. The biggest benchmarking we had done was with KPMG. So before we even put the tool in people's hands to use with business owners, KPMG did some due diligence. It was on about 90 of our online valuations, and it was across all different industries. And we fell within 3 to 6% on all of those. And again, we're not doing anything better. Yeah. We're really arriving at the results from a mathematical standpoint, very similar as to what the certified, old-fashioned way of doing it is.
Okay. And I know I could sit here, we could talk about this stuff all day. Yeah. We go deep. But from a user standpoint, from the end client standpoint, from the time I engage and I start into this process to the time I get the final report, obviously what we do with the report is a whole different story. But from the time I start entering information to the time I get the report back, what's that time frame look like? So
I would say we like to say 29 inputs, 29 minutes. So if you have that tax form, that you're generally going to be, I would argue, with the tax forms, it's much less than that. Yeah. I would say all in, you take your initial meeting, the inputs, and then the follow-up meeting. I mean, you're looking at a couple hours max. I mean, and it can even be, like I said, that input could be, 15 minutes, right? Yeah. So, and the nice thing is, as we touched on, there's a few different ways to gather and enter the info. It doesn't necessarily mean, you have to get the form and input, or someone else, have to do it. You can even spread that around. So sometimes you'll have, you'll input the financials, and then you can delegate out, some of the other inputs to, the CFO or perhaps the CPA getting involved in the process as well.
Okay. And then the one last thing, hey, I'm a business owner. I'm about to turn over my financials. What do you guys do with this information? How do I, what happens with that? Talk to me about the confidentiality.
Yeah. So first and foremost, all BizEquity employees were signed to NDAs. So we're of course legally bound to not share any of that info. But from a security and technology standpoint, anything that's input into our platform is held privately and securely. So only you can access your companies. No one else can, and we're not using that information or sharing it in any way. So that's one of the biggest pieces. Like I talked about going through compliance. That's the biggest, where we're under the microscope the most is from a security standpoint, because obviously it's very sensitive information. But we have that all held privately and securely under multiple firewalls and antivirus and all that. So we're more than protected. But from a pure just information being held standpoint, not sharing or using that info, that's a question we get time and time again.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Again, I could keep you here all day, and I don't want to make you stay here all day, but hopefully we'll get back together again and we can do some follow up on anything that we haven't covered already.
Yeah, absolutely. If you'd like to do another session, I'd be happy to help, and I'll send over some based on what we talked about. I'll send over some materials that pair with with our conversation today.
Great, I appreciate the time, Mike.
Oh, anytime. Thank you.
Right. Thanks.
Take care, Paul. All right, bye.
So that's our episode for today. Thank you for listening. If you found this topic interesting or useful, please let us know. Or if there are other topics you'd like us to address, let us know that too. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for being invested.
The RAND Group is a group comprised of investment professionals registered with Hightower Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Some investment professionals may also be registered with Hightower Securities, LLC, member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors, LLC. Securities are offered through Hightower Securities, LLC. This is not offered to buy or sell securities. No investment process is free of risk, and there is no guarantee that the investment process or the investment opportunities referenced herein will be profitable. Past performance is neither indicative nor a guarantee of future results. The investment opportunities referenced referenced herein may not be suitable for all investors. All data or other information referenced herein is from sources believed to be reliable. Any opinions, news, research, analysis, prices, or other data information contained in this presentation is provided as general market commentary and does not constitute investment advice. The Rand Group and Hightower Advisors LLC or any of its affiliates make no representations or warranties express or implied as to the accuracy or completeness of the information or for the statements or errors or omissions or results obtained from the use of this information. The Rand Group and Hightower Advisors LLC assume no liability for any action made or taken in reliance on or relating in any way to this information. The information is provided as of the date referenced in the document. Such data and other information are subject to change without notice. This document was created for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of the author and do not represent those of Hightower Advisors LLC or any of its affiliates.